And one more reminder, if people could try to rename themselves. If you hover over your picture and do the three dots, click on the three dots and you go to rename, you should be able to rename yourself. Okay. And then one quick question before we start. Which of these windows is the live streaming window?
I am not sure. Brian, is Brian Gephardt on? Not Brian.
Luis should be recording it and live streaming it right now. He's doing it from his end.
Okay. Well, I know that the recording is on mine. It automatically came on as well.
Right.
So, oh, so I can post this link. I see that there's a link that just popped up. So I can post that. Let's see.
So
I'll note in
ahead,
our CBOC, sorry to interrupt. I'll note in our CBOC meeting, we had another participant that I thought was handling the streaming. I forget the name of the participant. But
That's correct. That's correct. Luis Zamora works in our tech department. You've seen him at the board meetings. He's the one who controls the board meetings.
I brought that up just because I didn't see that participant in our meeting now, and I didn't know if that.
Yeah, he was invited.
Live streaming.
Yeah, he was invited. So let me email him and find out.
Well, I have this little box down here that says virtual FAC meeting Zoom, but it's not allowing me to join it to like activate it. So I'm not sure what's going on here, but technology, don't you just love it?
I can see this live streaming on the website now. I can send the link to everyone.
Oh, it is live streaming?
I just put it on the chat right now. If you click on it, I can see it's live streaming.
Okay, then we're good to go.
Perfect.
And we're good.
Okay.
Yeah, we're good.
Great. So I would like to call this meeting to order. And the ceremonial quote for this meeting is aprender a dudar es aprender a pensar, which means to learn to doubt is to learn to think. And I'd like to go ahead and start roll call. I can see meeting participants, so I will list them out as I see them. Kelly Lynch McMahon.
Here.
Antonio Burbeck Herrera, here. Brian Kilgore.
Here.
Diane Jones.
Here.
Michelle H.
Here.
Hartman Gruber. Okay. Judy Nye.
Here.
Brian Gebhardt.
Here.
Irene Chen. Sorry, Irene, could you repeat that?
Sorry, here.
Okay, great. Eric Chu.
Here.
Great. Trustee Crosby, Ann Crosby.
Present.
Mary Vigil.
Present.
Liz Fisher. You're on mute, Liz. Go ahead. Liz, I'm just testing for sound to make sure that you're able to participate in the meeting.
I'm present.
Great, thank you. Andrew Law.
Yeah.
Thank you. Henry Fung.
Here.
There is another Sharon Coco that might be Luis Zamora. Okay, they're on mute. Rachana Aithal.
Here.
Sharon Coco.
Here.
Robert Howe.
Here.
Great, thank you very much, everybody. And let me make sure the count. Okay, so we have 12 committee members on, so we have quorum. And if I could entertain a motion to adopt the agenda.
I move. This is Sharon.
Great. Any seconds?
I second it. It's Mary Vigil.
All right, thank you. So all in favor of adopting the agenda as written, please say aye.
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 Okay,
Aye.
let's see how do we do this in other meetings? Trustee Crosby or Trustee Jones, do you do it by raised hands in other meetings?
We've done it with a virtual raised hand or visual raised hand. If you have people who do not have their video streaming, raising a hand virtually is probably a good way to do it.
Okay, so for anyone who has video, you're free to either raise your hand to the camera, or alternatively, that motion that we practiced of raising your hand, please do so. So for now, if everybody could lower their hand first, we could redo that. Okay, so all in favor of adopting the agenda, please raise your hand. Okay, and all opposed?
Oh, make sure you take your hands down.
Okay, okay, now everyone's hand is down from the participants window. So I need to scan back any votes in opposition to adopting the agenda. Seeing none. All right, the agenda is adopted, and that was a unanimous vote. Now we can move to approval of the minutes / meeting notes. What you'll see here is the April 8th meeting minutes. We still have yet to present a draft of the March meeting minutes, and that will be at the next meeting. And the meeting minutes are attached as Exhibit A. So it's the second page of the agenda. So I'll entertain a motion.
I'll move to approve the minute.
Great. I have a motion. Any seconds?
Michelle Hartman Gruber.
Great. All right, so all in favor of adopting the minutes, please raise your hand. Thank you. Now please lower your hand. Great. Any opposed? Okay, that seems like a unanimous decision. And now we can move on to oral and written communications or public comment. Sharon, would you like to read, or should I read the comment that we received? I'm happy to.
Do you have it at the ready?
Yes, I do.
Okay, then why don't you go ahead?
Okay, great. So we've only received one public comment to the FAC inbox. And the person said, "Good morning. This was on April 16th. I'm not sure how to reach the person who can take care of things like this about PE. My kid's school has PE at 1:30. Honestly, in summer, none of us would send our kids to run at that time. It dehydrates and UV rays are not good. What is the need to have PE at that time? Ideal time would be in the morning, 8:30 to 11 or so. It's brutal in August and September. Maybe easy on teacher, but they are little kids who will be responsible if they faint or suffers heat stroke. Please consider this. No PE after lunch. It is not good. Not one. Ask multiple doctors. As you know, kids won't play in shade. Considering current events, kids and parents are less stressed in driving. Can elementary kids have classes from 9:30 to 4, middle school 9 to 3:30, and high school 8:30 to 3, and whatever, it reduces stress on traffic, especially with time change. It's unreal for kids to go to school that early and expect to study. They need relaxed time at home. My kids wake up at 6, me at 5. Still, what is the rush without shower, breakfast, relaxed moment? I think time to breathe before ready to learn. Everyone should see like precious after recent events. Please consider, and long waiting lines to pick up might be reduced with 30 minutes time difference. Ask any parents. Just had to voice these. Hope someone considers. Regards, Purnima." So that's the only comment we received. I think arguably it falls outside of the scope of this committee. And Kelly, I was going to ask you to figure out how to direct this comment because they're trying to find someone. but also I'm not sure it's applicable given current events.
I would go ahead and forward their comments to student services and to the assistant soup of instruction. So that's my first thought. I don't know, Brian or Eric, do you guys have other suggestions?
No, I would suggest the same thing.
Okay, yeah, that's what I would do. If you we'll just forward it on and let them answer the question.
Great, thank you.
Agree.
So that's that, and then we can move on to, that concludes public comment. And we can now move on to the discussion of the demographer report / follow-up. And so we were hoping that the demographer would be able to join us for this meeting. They unfortunately were not able to do so. We're waiting on confirmation that they'll be able to join us for the May 27th meeting, which is our quote unquote June meeting. So just keep in mind that we have 2 meetings this month. It's also going to be up to the committee whether or not we want to have further meetings during the summer. But that's when the demographer would be here. I agendized this in part to give the committee some time to discuss the report that was presented at the very recent board meeting and to potentially come up with follow-up questions. I'll also be asking Brian to share a couple of the questions that he had for the demographer, and we were hoping that they would be able to answer those, and in large part because their numbers are key to including in that report that the committee has adopted, which would then guide any potential solutions or proposals that we have for the board in addressing imbalance on facility use. So before I open it up to the committee to discuss, I would just like to quickly go over some highlights to the extent you do not have time to review the presentation. So if you could go to your inbox and go ahead and open up the presentation, that would be great. So I'll give a second or two to do that. So I just want to, focus us on page 3. They explain the methodology and the deliverables. They both gave a 2-year staffing projection as well as a 7-year staffing projection. If you go to page 5, they kind of do an overview of all the factors that they considered. They used birth data as well as mobility factors and the student yield factors. That's how much every new building yields in numbers of students to arrive at their student projections. But really the biggest impact seems to be, and obviously the trustees can jump in if they disagree or want to further contextualize it, but the biggest impact is on page 6, and it's the birth rate. And you'll see from 2014, which is the base, to 2018, there's a 15% decline. So if we consider 2014 figures to be 100%, then we have a drop to 84% in birth rates, and that's going to impact because you go to kindergarten around 5 years old. That's going to impact that class size in kindergarten. So effectively, you're having seniors graduate, but that kindergarten class being much smaller. And then they, went on in page 7 to discuss mobility. Ultimately, they arrive at an average of 1.00, so it ultimately doesn't impact their figures too much. They break it down per, attendance area like Ardenwood. They have the yield factors of residential developments. We have very low ones. And I would like to remind the committee that this was all prior to COVID-19. The demographers did not have the time, nor do they necessarily know the facts with which to change this report. And so there could be quite a few differences, many that the board discussed at their meeting in light of the last economic slowdown. And lastly, I think I'll leave us at page 10. Actually, I'll make a few more highlights, but you can see the numbers are generally trending downwards all the way to 32,847 in school year 2026-27. And I think the last point I want to draw the committee's attention to is the map. And that's supported by the numbers on page 12 as well. While while overall the district's size will be getting smaller, there are certain zones in the district that will be increasing in numbers of students. And you'll see that, well, of course, Bringhurst, because of the developments that are coming online, is increasing in number of students, but you also see Durham and some other schools with small increases, but mostly you have decreases across the board for the elementary schools. And then before we open it up to wider discussion, Brian, do you have in front of you your list of questions that you could hopefully go through so we don't have to double up on any questions that the committee creates? And again, we'll be providing these questions to the demographer and hopefully they'll have them answered by our next meeting.
Thank you, Antonio. I was just pulling those up and I will briefly go through them. There's more detail behind each of them, or more context behind each of them, but I'll briefly go through them. One of the questions of the demographer is, can they talk to and perhaps explain some of the differences between the previous demographer's report from October and what they're seeing now? I'll note that this report shows a larger decline in enrollment over 7 years, although there's many more nuances. I think the demographer answered this in the board meeting, but it'd be good for us all to be aware of this answer in terms of what is a good capture rate. The capture rate analysis they did was like, how many of the students are we capturing in our public school versus they're going, say, to a private offering or some other offering. And in the report, you'll see it's at 84%. And so the question is is that good or bad? And at least from the board meeting, they indicated it was good, but there may be some follow-up understanding we'd like there. The question around, can we get some of the information and graphics broken down by TK through 5 instead of TK through 6, so we can kind of see what what that might look like once all the middle schools are in place. We break down the difference between overloads and voluntary transfers in the attendance matrices. You'll notice I think there's even included in the presentation, but in the detailed report, they have these attendance matrices that are very similar to what I think we've seen before called the overload report, where it talks about the number of students that are going to a school but living in a different attendance area. And so I think breaking that down to understand which of those are overloads and which of those are, say, one of the immersion programs is useful information. Can we get a list of undesignated areas by elementary school area? And this gets to the heart that the demographer, unlike the previous demographer, did not account for developments that were undesignated, meaning the students could go to any place in the school district. And so it'd be good to understand how many of these undesignated areas there are. And we can talk about that more if there's follow-up questions. And then another comment, if charts can be organized by attendance area versus alphabetical lists, I think that it makes it easier to see the patterns since a lot of our work is by attendance area. And then can we get an Excel friendly version of the numbers to do further analysis on?
Thank you, Brian. Was that it?
I believe so, yeah.
Okay, great. And and you hit on this point, but I'm just a particular question. I don't quite understand why there's such a drop off on page 16 of the report. It's not broken out. Sorry, page 16 of the presentation, and it's not broken out in the report. Why 6 through 8 or 7 through 8 has a 78% capture rate. They show that I believe Walters is largely responsible for that. Where are those students going? That's what I would like to know, because otherwise elementaries have 80, somewhere in the mid 85, in the 85% capture rate. So
I can try and attempt to answer some of that because I was in the meeting where we reviewed that. So in middle school, they were also accounting for students that transfer out due to language programs in other areas, special needs students that were not calculated or captured in K through 5, where they may have had a learning disability or other issue that was now brought about in the middle school years from developmental stages that are not, you're not going to see it in K through 5, but it may pop up through 6 through 8. So there's about 11 or 12% ratio that they use to calculate, and that was based on best practices and industry averages of other districts that have similar size and function as ours. So that's part of why you see that shift. And the other is that people are leaving the area. They're just leaving the Bay Area because they're relocating someplace else that's more affordable.
Got it. Thank you very much, Kelly. If someone could raise their hands, I see Anne, Diane, and Liz in the queue, so I'll just take them in that order. Trustee Crosby.
Thank you. One thing, I think that's a great list, Brian. Especially if, if they're putting the undesignated into historic attendance areas, that's, sort of a misnomer that they won't necessarily get assigned to their historic attendance area. So it's good to capture that. The Williamson site has not been included. So there's going to be a big difference, when that comes online. And then I think your point was well taken about the reaction to COVID when we had the downturn prior. A lot of people who had their kids in private school came back to public school. So we may see an increase, even temporary bump, because of people not being able to afford private school any longer.
Thank you, Trustee Crosby. Trustee Jones.
So when we see a dip in our capture rate in middle school, this is just anecdotally, but just personally, I know several families who in middle school sought a private school option, because there are some families who see those as really critical years and for some reason really fear a public school option during those years. So we see, like I said, this is anecdotally, but I've seen families choose private school options for middle school and then come back for high school when they feel like some critical milestones have been passed, and maybe there aren't the same kind of private school options in high school that there are in elementary or middle school. So I think that's part of it. I think also Trustee Crosby is right to think about, we may see some folks who can no longer afford private school come back to the district. I am also concerned that I have seen, again, this is anecdotally, but families saying that they are not going to send their students back to public school if we go to in-person instruction until there is a vaccine. That they may opt for something like COIL or homeschooling until there is a vaccine. So in the short term, I think it is really hard to determine what we're going to see next year. If we maintain a distance learning model, we may see something different than if we were to go to in-person classes. And I don't think there is any precedent that we can use to kind of predict what we're going to see. So we're in a very volatile situation and unpredictable in the short term. Longer term, I don't know how this current situation is going to impact these projections, and I'm not sure that the demographer did either. But those are the kinds of things that I'm thinking about looking at this data.
And Liz, go ahead.
Another thing to consider, and it was kind of surprising to me that Lila Bringhurst is not going to be as big as we thought it would be. And as you know, we've had members from the Mandarin Immersion Program come to our meetings with various appeals and trying to find perhaps another location for their program to take place. I think as we consider when would be the best time to open Lila Bringhurst, seeing as those numbers are kind of low, maybe there's a greater argument for moving a program to Lila Bringhurst in order to bolster those numbers. But then again, there's still COVID to consider and what that might mean for our actual numbers coming in. But I think this is definitely bolstering an argument for putting that program somewhere else. Mm-hmm.
And I will go back to Trustee Crosby after one point. I believe today, who's chief scientist noted that it would probably be 4 or 5 years before COVID-19 is under control. Again, the timelines kind of vary by day by day, and the experts are, coming up with new opinions every day as they learn more information. But obviously that would have a tremendous impact, especially on Trustee Jones' point about parents rightfully, being fearful of having their kids go back to a in-person setting before there's a vaccine. Trustee Crosby.
We may also see the reverse, where if we are not going back to school, that there are people who feel because of their work obligations that they need to go to an in-school setting that they can do with private schools. So it really is a lot of up in the air. But what I wanted to say was, to Liz's point, we have obligations with our agreement with the developers on how many seats we have to have available at Lila Bringhurst and when it's supposed to be opening. So there is a lot of unknowns there as well. I appreciate your point, though. It would be nice to have, and I think that the board has said that they'd like to have the program at one site, but whether or not that's possible to do is another unknown right now. Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Crosby. I thought I had set a timer. I had not, so I'm estimating around 4 minutes are left, unless people want to extend the discussion. I'm assuming Trustee Crosby is out of the queue, and so Irene.
So I was wondering if there's any clarity on when we will find out what a structured day might look like, because there's a lot of talk about alternating times, different depending on different grades. There's also, who's working parents' schedule going to work with that? Parents will need to know. So I think that could impact things a bit.
So in direct response to that, on item number 7, the facility plans upon eventual physical return to schools, I think given the discussions that are being had about potentially, some kind of hybrid approach to schools, what should we as a committee expect that the district has addressed in terms of facilities? It won't be specific to your point, but envisioning a return to school at some point, what do we expect of our facilities? So I would ask that we discuss that during item number 7. But thank you for the question, Irene. Are there any other questions that we want to consolidate in our package to the demographer? Judy?
Just a couple things. Once we get deeper into the data, I'm curious, the transfers, do they include overloads? So when I was looking at that one slide that said, how many people are at Grimmer, for example, it doesn't delineate overloads as opposed to homeschool kids. So I would want to know that information before any decision was made. And then, we talk about Durham having a significant increase over the course of the time, but they may possibly have the space available because they don't have that lease situation. And so I'd want to take into consideration space available at each location.
Can you repeat, because I'm going to try to consolidate the questions, this point about transfers and overloads, you pointed to a specific slide.
It was...
Write me an email, but
okay.
First let's try, what slide is it?
in the shorter version, it's page 15.
And you were focusing on
When you
what?
go down, like you find the school and you go down the column rather than the row,
Yeah.
you'll see the number of students that are in from other schools. I'd want to know how many of those students are transfers or as opposed to overloads.
Okay.
And where they're coming from, I think we already know.
Okay, great. And then Brian.
So I know a while back we inquired of staff as to the program capacity, so kind of building on Judy's question around what we think the capacity numbers are each school. I guess both pre and post COVID will be come into play as well. And then I definitely would like to see some more tools for us to work with the data. I'm doing some of my own analysis of the data and happy to share anything that the committee is interested in, including the tools I'm developing.
Okay, so 2 points. Number one, I believe staff is going to provide us an update on the capacity reports under item 5. And then number 2, we've exhausted our time. So if anyone else wants to discuss anything further or raise any other questions, I'll need a motion to extend discussion time. Great. Okay, seeing none, let's go ahead and move to the next item, just noting that this past agenda item would probably would be repeated at this next meeting, hopefully with a demographer there. And I'll turn it over to Kelly to give us an update on facilities.
I'm gonna go ahead and share my screen. Antonio, I just sent you and Sharon a, excuse me, a copy of the report. So I'm gonna go ahead and post it and let me know that everybody can see it. Can everyone see that? Yes, no?
Yes.
Okay. All right. I'm gonna make it a little bit bigger so we can see. All right. Is that better now? Visually? Okay. So I didn't have a template to refer to as to what you guys got previously in terms of a report. So I just put this together. So in terms of format, please let me know if there's a different format that you all prefer to receive the information or if there's something that I forgot. But this was just a summary of what I thought you all would look for. But please let me know if this is appropriate. So unfortunately, I was not able to make the last meeting, but I did receive questions from Antonio. And several of the questions I reviewed and have answered here. So I'll quickly go through them. There are primarily 6. So currently, question 1, update on use of campus personnel for security purposes. Our current security company is providing additional patrols and has aided in expanding the monitoring of the Fremont Police Department. So we currently in facilities and M&O are working directly with the security company to, as problems arise, address them. We currently have some wireless cameras in areas that we do not have any visuals from the street. And it's a temporary fix to see if we could alleviate the problem in certain areas. And so far, it's been working pretty well. But we are going to go ahead and issue a study to be done on the district for us to evaluate where our hotspots are and where our holes are in our vulnerabilities of our facilities. Because we had, I believe last count as of Tuesday, we had 87 break-ins in the last 30 days. So, and the break-ins range from breaking in and just trashing a room to actually stealing equipment, or we had one school where they're actually trying to steal cleaning supplies. We found, break-ins with homeless people, windows being broken, but primarily just people breaking in to try and get stuff. But fortunately, the schools before the shutdown were very good about, removing all the really expensive and critical items that we would not be able to readily replace. So we've been very, very fortunate in that sense. We do not have an overall cost of what the impact has been of those vandalisms, but we will be gathering that data and we'll be able to provide an update for you all because, we're kind of in real time just responding. So, and as you know, for us, our accounting occurs on a monthly basis. So April just closed out. We're doing closeout now for April and we're accruing the cost for May. So we'll have sorry about that, my motion sensor's going off. We'll have a very comprehensive expense for you guys on this issue. I'll be right back. I just had to go turn the lights back on, sorry. In terms of vandalism, I just answered question 2. So our primary sites that have been heavily affected by break-ins and vandalism are Kennedy, American High, Grimmer, Olivera, Thornton, Mission High, and Irvington. Several elementary schools were also affected, but I don't have the full count and extent on the elementary schools. The high schools and the middle schools, I recently received information on those, so that's why I included them in this report for you all. Question 3, what is the impact of COVID-19 on our current contract obligations? Right now, we do not have any financial impacts that we have incurred at this point. We've been fortunate enough that most of the contracts and goods and services that needed to be purchased for the construction that's going on right now, they were purchased prior to the shutdown. So we're in really good shape in terms of being able to continue work and not really miss any construction opportunities. The only problems that we are having that we are going to be affected by are the projects that are in design development that are being reviewed by our government agency of DSA and OPSC. So those are unfortunately out of our control because they also are in shutdown mode. So they have very limited staff who are actually working, or if they are working, they're working virtually. And so they're working at reduced hours as well. So we are anticipating a slowdown in the review process that's required for the documents that are currently in DSA. So that will impact our schedules downstream for the projects that are currently in design. But everything that's in construction, the plan is that those should still finish on time and within the proposed schedule that was previously proposed prior to COVID-19. There are 2 exceptions with Horner is actually, we've accelerated the schedule because we don't have students on site and we are able to do work with an open campus. We've actually resequenced a lot of the work and we're starting the ball fields and demolition of the existing building about a month ahead of schedule. So we will capture time that would have been lost if we had to continue to work around the students through the end of the school year. So we're very happy about that. The other project that we're able to capture time on is the Thornton project. Because the campus is going to be vacant sooner, and we have received some approvals for our site utility work and our ball field redesign, we've resequenced that to start prior to the new building. So that work will begin this summer versus beginning in next spring. So we've really accelerated on that and are capturing time on that project. So, and we can say thank you to COVID-19 for that, but that's not really a good joke. So sorry about that. Our solar project, question 4, we have been working diligently on that, and there will be an RFP that will be going out in the month of June for solar services for install. And Eric, do you have the actual amount of projects that we're planning on having encompassed in that one? Eric, is Eric Chu on this call?
Yes, I am.
Okay.
Yeah. But I don't have. Basically, is for the solar project you're talking about, right?
Yes. Yes.
We have five. We have total 5 schools in the proposals.
Uh-huh.
I have the. Let me see. I give you the name of those schools, which is Honor, Thornton, Hopkins, Centerville, and did I say Water already?
No, you didn't say Walters.
Yeah, so Water, right. So that's 5 schools.
Okay. So all of those schools are in the plans to have solar installed on site. And all of the buildings that are being modernized to be solar ready. The other outcome that's going to happen from this proposal, we also are having an additional energy analysis to make sure that we are maximizing our, want to get the most bang for our buck. But in these times, as long as our buildings are solar ready, it's better to have them available to add the solar at a later time versus not taking advantage and doing those modernizations now and having to do the heavy lifting later. So we're making all of the buildings that are being modernized, existing buildings that are being modernized, solar ready, as well as the new facilities having the ability to have solar capacity as well.
And Kelly, if I may jump in real
Sure.
quick, just to remind the committee, because of the previous committee member who left, whose passion was solar projects, we have 2 Kennedy attendance area vacancies, both for a community member and parent. So if you know parents / community members in those areas, please encourage them to join this committee. Thank you.
The next question is question 5, the toilet needs assessment. So I have found the documentation that was prepared in 2016, and I reviewed that earlier today, and I have not quite understood exactly everything that was being covered in that, but what I did gather is that the areas that were identified as being deficient, many of those schools are actually part of the modernization and the bond program. So if there's any bathroom needs that were not identified in that report, please let us know. But through the modernization program, those upgrades are actually occurring at the schools where the modernization is happening. And we will continue to address the deficits as they're brought to our attention and make sure that we are in compliance. But we are doing a full ADA modification and upgrade district-wide, and those sites are being prioritized right now. I don't have a date as to when that will start, but we are in the process of having design services procured so that that work can actually occur. And we are in full compliance for our toilet and fixture count in terms of what our school capacities are based on facility size. So not based on enrollment, but based on square footage size of what was identified in the initial study. So that's how far I've gotten on the toilet needs assessment. The
And
question, sure.
just one second. I
Sure.
had lost track of participants with the screen share, but I believe Henry has his hand raised.
Yes, but I can wait until after Kelly's done with her report.
Great, thanks.
Okay. The other question, number 6, the capacity reports. We received all of our capacity updates from our principals in the month of April, and we are in the process of compiling all of that data, and we will be prepared to submit the final report and annual capacity update either at the end of this month or the first part of June after the information is compiled. And the other items that are included in this report are just the actions that were taken for the board in the month of April. I don't know if you guys want me to go through each one or if you just want to read them as reference for yourself. And of course, they are available in the board minutes for each one of these meetings that's are identified.
Kelly, I think what we'll do is we'll post this along with the agenda. We'll ask staff to post this document you've shared with us.
Okay.
So it's part of the public record, and so people can read the Board of Education action items at their leisure.
Okay.
Thank
Well,
you.
I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing my screen.
All right, and I have 3 people in line, Henry, Brian, and Trustee Crosby, in that order, please.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Thank you, Kelly. So for the solar projects, we're wondering. So it sounds like there are the school district is thinking about just adding the solar panels in the new constructions or updated constructions in terms of middle school. But then from the 2017 district report from the consultant, I think they were looking at doing that for all the middle school and high school, and therefore, with that, even after the installation cost, it would save the district like $33 to $36 million in 25 years. Is there a reason why we're kind of slowing down and just doing in the new constructions instead of doing for all the secondary schools?
I'm sorry about that. We are in the process of finding and allocating all the funding for us to do the entire project. So my understanding, my predecessor laid out a plan based on what was able to be accomplished through the bond and what was able to be accomplished through M&O. And I'm still reviewing that and determining how that decision was come about. But to sum it up in a nutshell, it comes down to budget and us not having full budget capacity to accomplish everything. Excuse me, everything. We're in the process of talking to 2 consultants over the next month on finding additional monies through PG&E grants for energy, new energy efficiency, more Prop 39, more Prop 39 money. And so I'm not going to say we're not doing everything, but for right now, the plan is only for the middle schools and the high schools that we have the budget for available to complete over the next couple of years. But the plan is to expand everything district-wide.
Okay. And just to follow up, I mean, I see that from the consultant report that there's an option to do the power purchase agreement, PPA. That would not require the district to upfront any construction costs. So would that be a possibility? Then that way we don't have to look for our own funding. And we, even with that option, looks like from the report, it will save the district $33.9 million.
You are absolutely right. And that is one of the options that we are currently looking at right now. And we actually have our legal counsel looking at the power purchase agreement to make sure that whichever vendor we choose, we are moving forward prudently and provides the district with the best options in the event something changes in the future that we don't want to continue to pursue. So that is one of the options that we are looking at.
Okay, thank you.
So if there's no objection, I'd like to extend discussion for 3 more minutes to take these last 3 questions. Seeing no objection. All right, we have Brian, Trustee Crosby, and Trustee Jones.
So two things. On the vandalism, I'm curious. He said, I think it was 80 or 87 incidents in the last 30 or 60 days. I'm curious what that compares to normally. I imagine it's probably much worse, but I'm always kind of curious what the baseline is we're comparing that to. And the second item is on the solar. I thought there was also board direction in a board meeting quite a while ago around which things to target, and that may be a factor in the design of this first initial solar as well. I don't remember the details of it, but I believe there was a board meeting and board direction a few years ago, perhaps. So those are my two things.
I'll get my homework and get you an answer on what the baseline was for the vandalism.
Hey,
and
Kelly,
I will find out what's going on with the original solar project.
Kelly, real quick. I just need a nod from committee members, whether that's a committee, project that we want staff to undertake. I assume it is, but that's how I'd like to approach it. So if people agree with those two requests of staff, if you could either nod your head or raise your hand, please go ahead and do so. Okay, great. So it's definitely a committee's will. Thank you, Brian. Trustee Crosby.
Thank you. I will say from our perspective that the number of vandalisms is very unusual. We have certain sites that are more vulnerable that have had some repeated, but there's nothing. In my 7 years being on the board, I've never seen anything like this. And I would like to just put everyone a little bit at ease. We do have insurance, but whether or not this just meets our deductibles or whether or not it's money out of our pocket, we're waiting to hear. So that's another thing to take into consideration. The other thing I think is pertinent to this committee is the lead testing. We have had some sites that have had higher than normal levels of lead that has shown up. We did a district-wide sampling, and then the board chose to go ahead and do full testing of the district. Our hope was, especially that since students are not on site, that it would be easy to do it while they're gone. And we heard at our last board meeting that that was not going to be possible, that in order to do the testing, the faucets have to be in regular use in order for them to do that testing. So we actually are going to have to wait until students are back on the site, which is unfortunate because it would have been nice to have that done now while no one's there. So I just thought you might want to know.
And Trustee Jones.
Yeah, so I did want to say that I do recall a board meeting where we approved a consultant for some solar work. I think it was shortly after I was on the board, so I'd have to go back and look at which meeting that occurred, but I think it was Brian who mentioned that. I think that is correct, that there is some board decision that relates to solar that's already been made that we need to probably go back and look at. Antonio, this is maybe a question for you. I know Irene asked a question about what going back to in-person instruction might look like for next year might be, and I have some information to share with the various webinars and meetings I've had over the last couple of weeks. So when the right time for that is, I can share it.
Sorry, yes, in 2 items, so in like 4 minutes. Is that all, Trustee Jones?
Yep.
Okay, great. All right, now we can go ahead, seeing no one else in queue and exhausting the time for that item, we can move forward with the subcommittee update on the committee report, and I'll hand it over to Brian, who is on the sub.
Thank you, Antonio. This is two things tonight. As a reminder, Antonio, Henry, and I are on the subcommittee, and formerly Tara, until she resigned. And we met recently to kind of take a look at the demographer numbers and the state of the report and the state of the district to recommend to the FAC kind of what the next steps are. And I think we all felt, with all the uncertainty going on, that that we needed to take the time to review the demographer's report, to see how the COVID impacts affect our future plans. And so we think that now is the time to really analyze the situation, and we're not ready to they don't recommend that we try to take the report to proposing specific solutions or for further iterating on the report at this time, but that we focus on getting our data and information as clear as possible, with so many things up in the air. So that we still would like to continue as a subcommittee so we can help support that in preparing information for the bigger FAC. And as part of that, we're down one person, and we would appreciate if there was another volunteer who would be willing to join the subcommittee and help us with that effort. And Henry and Antonio, if there's anything I missed, please feel free to add.
No, and the reason that we met as a subcommittee, even though the report belongs to the committee, the whole committee, was just, you know, we're close to the report. You know, we did quite a bit of the work on it, and either we had tasked ourselves, or if I recall, the committee had tasked us with updating the report with new demographic numbers. And so that's why we wanted to, you know, provide a recommendation to you. But of course, the committee is free to choose a different path. But that is our recommendation, to not act on the report as of yet until we have more clarity on the situation given the COVID pandemic. So I would like to reiterate Brian's point. If any member would like to join the subcommittee, we would greatly appreciate it, especially as we try to further pour into the demographers report and whatever else the committee wishes to task us with. All right, don't everyone jump in and raise your hand. Anne, are you joining the subcommittee? And no, go ahead. Trustee Crosby, your hand is raised.
Oh, I didn't raise it, sorry.
Okay. Okay, so
I'm glad to be on the committee, but I think you probably want a committee member.
Sure. So feel free to email me directly if this is something you'd like in the subcommittee. That would be great as well. Okay, so now we can go ahead and move on to the point here was really to some classrooms are smaller than the average classroom. And so when we're looking at when we're looking at the capacity reports, we may want to treat all classrooms the same, but we cannot. And so to the extent they are smaller because they're adapted from either special ed classrooms that are supposed to house a certain number, but now are housing, 30 to 35 students, in order to practice social distancing within those classrooms, that would be impossible to do so. So we'd have to further reduce capacity. So one question I would have to district staff is, are all of the capacity reports that the individual sites that they provided, are they in light of COVID-19? Do they at least have that as a consideration? And if not, will they require an update?
I want to make sure I understand your question, Antonio. Are you asking me if the capacity reports that we have in place are accounting for COVID-19, or are you asking us to account for COVID-19?
Would any of the numbers that were provided in light of a potential return need tweaking or further commenting on in order to treat those numbers at face value?
Yes, we do have to evaluate for social distancing requirements. The numbers were provided to the district over the course from late February to early April. So the social distancing aspect was not taken into consideration when the principals were providing the information of what their current enrollment or what their future enrollment will be based on the social distancing standards. So now we're in the process of taking that information, evaluating it, and coming up with a plan of action as to, one, how to adhere to the standards, make sure that we're keeping within the compliance requirements, reduce the impact on schedule, looking at staggered days. There are 3 task force that have been created within the administration over the last 2 weeks that we're working on the exact same things that we're talking about here. How do we, one, how do you keep kindergartners through 5th graders from touching each other? What does that look like? How do we open the district office so that district staff feel safe and secure and able to function in the workplace? Do we test students upon entry and exit of school every day? Do we look at a different bell schedule? Do we break up and do programming in a block schedule? So these are all things that are being evaluated, and I don't have answers for you all to say, yes, definitively, the district is doing X, Y, and Z, but we're coming together and we're thinking about it, and we're preparing information for us to discuss with the board as to what options are available, because it's not going to be a one size fits all. It's going to be, hey, what does it look like for this enrollment area? What does it look like for this particular school and their particular needs? Is there opportunities for us to do hybrid? Is there opportunity for us to do whole online? It's a moving conversation that's evolving every week, that we're coming up with stuff to put on the table to talk about.
That's great. And so before I hand it over to Trustee Jones and Crosby, yeah, the point would be, from a facilities perspective, our goal in these conversations, to the extent that this is agendized at the next meeting as well, is, has X been considered, whatever item that again pertains to facilities? And seems like there are 3 task forces that are going through the motions and considering these items, but we want to make sure that the items that we discuss are then dealt with in these task forces, or that the district at least, thinks about it and either deprioritizes it or prioritizes it, but at least that it's in the mix. So now going to Trustee Jones and then Trustee Crosby.
So just having sat in on a number of webinars and meetings with legislators and county health officials and all of the things I've been doing over the last couple of weeks, the concerns that I think have been raised are, can we go back to an in-person instruction model before there is a vaccine? And if we do, would we presumably need to maintain social distance and provide the kind of classroom sanitation that we would need to do that? And so the things that I have heard, and this is globally, not necessarily specific to Fremont, but I'm assuming it mostly applies, is that the numbers I've heard tossed around are, you really can't have more than 10 students in a classroom, a typical classroom, and be socially distanced. So if you think about going to a staggered schedule model, if our average class size is 30 students, you'd have to have 3 separate cohorts of students alternating. It's not just having a morning session and an afternoon session, but you would have to accommodate 3 separate cohorts of students. That's in elementary school. Now say you move to a junior high or high school model and you're trying to keep a classroom of 10 students, but you have to keep those 10 students together as a cohort. So you can't be moving them period to period from classroom to classroom. Do you even have students who have the exact same math class, English class, history class, science class, and elective to keep those students together as a cohort? So the challenges of going back to any sort of in-person instruction, especially at the secondary level, seem to me to be, I don't want to be pessimistic, but that's my nature. It seems insurmountable, really, to me, to be able to go back to any sort of even hybrid model. With our facilities constraints. It's not like we have enough facilities to spread out to have class sizes of 10. That's not where we are. So, we're still waiting for instructions and guidance from the state and county, which is very, very frustrating to not, to feel like we have to make like a dozen contingency plans depending on what the guidance that we get is. But facilities wise, I don't see us having the capacity to go back to an in-person model before there is a vaccine. And we may need to consider something like bringing back our special ed students who really need in-person instruction. And if we utilize our facilities to provide instruction for that pool of students, we probably have enough classrooms to keep class sizes small enough to do that. Would we maybe consider, you know, a certain grade level of students that we would bring back onto our campuses to keep classes to the size that we need, but then we need enough teachers in those grade levels to manage that. Not to mention, is there even the supply chain of cleaning supplies to be able to sanitize our classrooms in the way that we need to have people back on site? And I know I didn't provide any answers, but just some information in terms of what I'm hearing about what the considerations will be in terms of moving to, you know, I think we've all heard that Cal State University system has already decided they're going to be in basically full online mode for at least the first semester of next school year. So there's a lot that we have to consider, and the facilities constraints that we have absolutely play into what our options even are.
So we have 7 minutes left, and seeing in the queue, Trustee Crosby, Irene, and Judy.
I'll try to be brief. I think absolutely, to your point, Antonio, we should be looking at per square foot and not by classroom. So if you have so many students per square foot, taking that into consideration with the size of the classrooms definitely seems to me to make sense. But also the extra space. So your lunch, some of our multi-purpose rooms are smaller, playground space, restrooms, the number of restrooms becomes even more critical. And one of the, as Diane pointed out, you know, we had a meeting with the county to discuss with Karen Monroe what they're hearing. And I know there's a lot of frustration with parents, but they're not hearing it. You know, the county is trying to get information. You know, the governor is announcing things without anybody having any information before he announces it. This conversation about coming back in July just came out of nowhere. No one was consulted in advance. So there's a lot of moving parts. So if you don't know, it's because nobody knows really at this point. The other thing I think that's going to be important is in lower grades, it may be that you mask the students and keep the teacher unmasked. And in upper grades, you mask the teacher and keep the students unmasked. There conversations like that, because when you have next year brand new kindergartners, are they going to come into a classroom with an adult they don't know, who they can't see that person's face? I mean, there's really a difference on grade levels. There's been a conversation, well, maybe you start with the secondary because those are older kids who can understand about not touching each other or getting close to each other. But then there are families that have an older child who looks out for younger children. So then families lose out on their childcare so that people can go back to work, which is another whole piece of this. And the other question is, do we bring Bringhurst online? Even if we don't need it as a school necessarily beginning of next year, do we consider bringing that in just to have the additional space? And will it be ready? And it may be, as Diane pointed out, given the needs, that you have a hybrid model where you have, you know, 10 kids in class and the rest doing distance learning, but you're not going to triple the number of teachers you have. So there may just be less instruction on a day-to-day basis, maybe better than what we're having right now as far as one-on, you know, instruction, direct instruction, but it's not going to be going back to the classroom for everyone all at once, all week.
I would like to jump in, but I'll do so at the very end. We have 4 minutes. Irene?
I just want to note that I think there's actually already several people I've heard about defecting to a model like K-12 or California Connections Academy because they are so frustrated with the distance learning that we're having right now. I also know there through the mommy chatters, there will be a lot of people who will only be comfortable doing distance because they are living with grandparents and things like that. So that might be something to take into consideration. And also, isn't there also, I don't know, allowances for doing tents or outside instruction?
Have any of the trustees heard anything along those lines? The outdoors is safer.
But I would think that weather would also play into the ability to do that and cost.
Right, and you also have concerns with outdoor instruction if you need electric access to do a presentation, or do any kind of, you know, research on your Chromebooks. You know, a lot of things that we need require electricity that you wouldn't get in a tent.
Okay. Is that all, Irene? Okay. Judy?
The only thing I would consider for facilities is the custodial support that we will need. I have one night custodian for 8 hours, and that is clearly not going to be enough to do the sanitation that's required. What my other custodian was released because of budget cuts. So that's a huge consideration when we're looking at this issue.
Thank you. Great point. We have Brian, Liz, Michelle, and Trustee Jones, and we have a minute 45, so I'll need a motion soon if we wish to continue discussion. Go ahead, Brian. Brian, you're on mute.
If I unmute, that'll help. Just add to the, I'm sure the long list of things that are being considered. No need to response right now, but I'm wondering what any role, you know, to testing, temperature checks, that kind of stuff could do to help with reopening. I recognize, as many of you do, that we're nowhere near where we need to be at the testing levels to get to contact tracing and testing being a solution, but I'm curious how it could help. And yeah, but that's the only comment, but no need for anybody to respond.
Great, thank you. And I'll be collecting all of these points and sending them to staff. We now have Liz, Michelle, and Trustee Jones. We have a minute left, so again, after Liz's comment, I'll need a motion.
So I just wanted to say that since we have parents who can exercise their own choice whether or not to send their children to school, perhaps a poll might be needed to be sent out at a certain time over the summer, just to get some finite information as to how many students we couldn't expect. Anyway.
Okay, Michelle, if you want to make a motion to see if the committee entertains extending.
Yes, I'd like to move that we extend by 5 minutes to further this construction or discussion.
Any second?
I'll second.
I hear a second. All in favor, please either. Okay, so everybody lower your hands. I see the queue. Okay. All in favor, raise your hands either virtually or on the platform. Okay. Now, everyone lower their hands. Any opposed? Ayes have it. I'll set the timer for 5 minutes. Go ahead.
Yes, what I wanted to bring up in concurrence, like what Judy, thank you for bringing up about custodial, is that we're seeing that a lot of custodians were laid off recently, but we're looking, as we bring things back online, how are we going to sanitize? We probably need to look at newer equipment for sanitation rather than just a rag and some disinfectant. There are newer products out there like thermal, where they actually mist the entire area, which is a much better sanitation product. But regardless of those type of things, we can see that people are, like you said, are looking to have siblings, older siblings or whatever, or however they set up for their daycare situations, whether it's a latchkey kid or whatever, so that they can go back to work, we may start seeing more people as the everything starts to unfold. But then we could actually see everything clamping down really fast again with a second surge or a third surge. So we could see where all of a sudden we come back from Christmas vacation and everyone's re-enrolling because they think, oh, everything's good. We're all going back to work. We're going to send all the kids back to school, and then get slammed again with a second or third surge or something like that. And then, how do we prepare for the influx immediately? How do we downsize immediately to try and take care of our costs? So that's my 2 cents. Thank you.
Thank you. Trustee Jones.
So my feed cut out briefly, but I wanted to address what Brian said about maybe doing temperature checks or some sort of screening before students and staff enter. And I feel, personally, what I'm hearing is that that's really not feasible, especially with children, because they can be asymptomatic carriers. So checking temperatures does not guarantee, especially that young children don't have it and aren't passing it on. So without an actual test to see if somebody has it that is definitive, those sort of screening measures just don't work for kids. And I think we've all heard about the complications that we're now seeing in children with these syndromes that, I'm not willing to take risks with our kids. I also wanted to, talking about the budget issues, we're supposed to have the May revise tomorrow, but just generally what I'm hearing is that we may see up to a 15% decrease in our funding. When you think about what that means to a district like FUSD, if anybody was watching the last board meeting and one of our budget analysis, FUSD with our unrestricted general fund spends 91% on salaries and employee costs that are the statutory benefits that we pay. That means we have only 9% of our budget that we pay for like water, electricity, gas, cleaning supplies, textbooks, all those things. If we take a 15% hit, how do we even stay solvent? There's no way we can take a budget hit that doesn't include, I hate to say this, increasing class size at a time when we know for the health and safety of our students, we need to be decreasing class size. It's another one of those things that keeps me up at night that I'm having nightmares about. It feels insurmountable to me, but I'm sure, we will find a way. But another thing that we have to consider when we think about going to either an in-person continuing distance learning or hybrid model is that we don't yet know what the state is going to do in terms of funding. You all know that we're funded based on ADA. How is the state going to calculate ADA next year? Are they going to mandate that we have some sort of in-person instruction to count ADA? Are they going to give us full ADA for continuing distance learning? We just don't know yet. So it's really hard to kind of make decisions before we know some of the answers about our budget situation and the way the state is going to handle ADA. And, I know we approved the reduction of a whole bunch of custodians with the hope that we would be able to save those positions by the time we submitted our final budget. But when we're looking at an additional 15% budget cut, I'm looking for divine intervention, I think. And I know I just threw out a bunch of problems with no solutions, but those are the kinds of things that we're all thinking about and considering, and it's difficult.
So unless there's objection, I'm going to go ahead and entertain Trustee Crosby's comment. Seeing none, go ahead, Trustee Crosby.
Thank you. I'll be brief. I just wanted to let you know that we had a meeting with the California School Boards Association after some of the budget information came out and the budget analyst report, and we're looking at the potential for $18 billion cuts in education. So that's a significant hit. And I would say to Michelle's point that I think that we are likely to have to bring some of the custodians back if we go back to in-class instruction. And my hope would be that one of the first things that we would do is really do some intensive computer instruction so that if we do suddenly have to go back out again, we are better prepared for students to understand how to do computer instruction on their own without needing additional support from family members, because that really puts kids at risk who don't have those type of supports at home.
And the one point I just wanted to make, it looks like globally a lot of countries are allowing their students to return. There have been some promising results in that their trends are not going up 3 weeks after schools students have returned to schools, but that is far too early to tell whether that'll hold. Also, it seems like students and kids do not transmit the disease as much as adults do. But again, everything is being found out daily. There's new news. Whether or not to be optimistic or pessimistic, it's unclear. And so obviously the discussion will be very different, several months from now. Okay, so that exhausts that item. Let me move to, I'll hand over the reins to Liz, who will give a report to the committee on membership terms. And Liz, are you able to share your screen, or should I try to find your item real quick and share it myself? I'll prepare to do just
yes. If you wouldn't mind sharing that with your screen, I'd appreciate it.
All right. So, can people see my screen? Can anybody give me a thumbs up? Okay, great. Go ahead, Liz, if you'd like to speak on it.
Yeah, well, it's pretty self-evident there. We haven't had too many changes other than, of course, Tara has resigned. So now we have a vacant position for the Kennedy attendance area. We have always maintained a vacant position with the parent not represented in an attendance area place in our committee. But as you can see there, the month of the appointment is listed for each of us. And we're presumed to have 2 years on the committee. And yet a few of us at the very beginning of the initiation of this committee agreed to serve 3 years so that there would be a staggering of elections. And you can see those persons marked with an asterisk in that last column. Any questions?
Am I on mute? I'm confused. Okay, no. So I guess one thing I realized is I believe the community member for Kennedy should also be vacant. So that we should add that row as well.
No, that is, you'll see that Tara isn't listed, and she was formerly a Kennedy person. And
right, but she was a parent, and so there's the parent Kennedy attendance area, and then there should be another community member Kennedy, and that would be it. So there should be 3 vacancies, I believe.
Oh, okay.
Perhaps, but either way, I think that the point here is that for terms that are coming up soon, I see, for example, Irene's term is ending soon. Per our reading of the bylaws, you can renew your terms and you can serve indefinitely, but it's for these term commitments. Unless the board wants to jump in and guide me otherwise, when Liz and I took a look at it, it doesn't look like the term renewals have to be approved by the board. So if you could just let the chair and the secretary know that you'd like to renew your term prior to the ending of that, that would be great. If otherwise the board sees, you know, that the bylaws read differently, if they could let me know, that would be great as well.
So then, if I understand you, Antonio, if say for instance, Irene decides she'd like to continue and she emails that in effect, we would put her on our agenda for next meeting.
I don't believe the committee has to approve it. It's more, she would be serving another 2 years, but she should notify us. Otherwise, her term expires at the end of May. And the reason I had Liz prepare this report is to, you know, update those of us whose terms are ending soon so that we can determine whether we want to stay on. To the extent you don't, then there's a vacancy and the board fills that vacancy. So no need to put anyone on the spot, but, you know, we'll be reaching out as terms end to gauge whether or not committee members wish to stay on the committee. And again, to the extent our interpretation changes because of board input, we'd be happy to take it. Other than that, anything else, Liz?
That concludes that that report.
Thank you so much. Let me stop sharing. Okay, and now we can go to the last part of our agenda, which is thoughts on future meeting topics. Just a preview, and let me find participants so I can see people's raised hands. Actually, no. Okay, I see 2 raised hands. Oh, sorry, I wasn't calling on people because I was raising screen sharing. Trustee Crosby and Brian.
Yeah, mine's actually on the previous item. Generally, approval of members does go to the board from other committees, but I don't know why you couldn't put in your bylaws a different process. I'm not sure what the process is currently. But that having been said, frequently the board likes to keep consistency, so we frequently will vote to have somebody continue. But I would say, you know, if you're working well the way you are going, you may just put it in your bylaws that it doesn't go to the board, and then the board would just approve that.
I would certainly like direction as to where to find that in our own bylaws, because the only place that we see board approval is in the initial term. So I understand that that's a practice. As I read the bylaws now, it seems like the terms can be renewed by the members. It's just silent. If that's the direction you want to give us anyways, we're happy to take it, and then maybe either spell it out in the bylaws that that's the approach. But as of right now, that is how we're reading the bylaws when Liz and I looked at it. So we would certainly love, you know, I can certainly email both of you after the meeting. And Brian?
I had another topic, but building on that thought, it's something we could agendize for the committee to consider whether, you know, what we want to recommend our practice around term renewal be, right? We can always change our bylaws or adopt a standing rule as well. Just as a suggestion, maybe we agendize it for the committee to decide what we think is the right thing to do. Obviously, I also am very fine taking direction from the board. There's a lot of past practice here as well. So just a suggestion for how we might resolve that. The second item, I know in the board meeting, there's been discussion of the immersion program. And I think there's also, also looking at what facilities like Lila Bringhurst, Liz Fisher mentioned today, that is an idea, and I know many others have. And I think given what happened the last time the immersion program was brought to the board, I hope there's a robust community engagement piece to that. And I think, and I wanted to propose that FAC is actually a good community engagement body for getting feedback on whatever plan is being put together there. And so I wanted to suggest that as a potential future agenda topic.
Okay, so seeing 3 points, I like to always check the committee's temperature on these items. So term renewal, would we like to discuss that as a committee? If people could either, okay, I see a lot of raised, are these raised hands for future meeting topics or for this item? So if everyone could lower their hands first and now raise your hands to discuss term renewals. All right, I see a few hands up there, great. The Mandarin immersion program, if everybody could lower their hands, now raise their hands for Mandarin immersion program. And great. And then bringing on Bringhurst, if everybody could lower their hands and now raise them. Okay, great. So those are all future meeting topics to either add to this next, well, I guess we only have one more meeting this year, barring the committee wanting to create additional meetings.
Antonio, is it just the Mandarin immersion program that you're going to discuss? Because I thought Brian was referring to both programs.
Brian, could you clarify?
It'd be both. It'd be whatever proposal staff is coming up with. So, which I would assume would be both. But my understanding is there's a proposal staff's working on, and so the request would be to reach out to staff and it has to be part of the community engagement element of providing feedback on that proposal, and to see if we can agendize that on, well, or we only have one meeting, but yeah.
Great, and
that's the intent.
Okay, so I'll make sure it's both. For the prior time, FAC was told that there was going to be a presentation to the board, and that was our update all along the way. So we'll make sure we're actually, you know, an engaging part of the process.
So there's a couple, yeah, there's a couple of assumptions there, right? If there is a community engagement piece to putting together this proposal, that we'd like to be a part of that. If it's going to the board without community engagement, then yeah, that would be a different situation.
Okay. Now, Michelle. I'm going to take that to mean you're going to wait. Okay, you've lowered your hands. Got it. Liz. Liz, we'll come back to you. Henry.
Yes, I would like to. I mean, one of the reasons why I kind of want to look at the solar a little bit more is look at ways from facility standpoint, how to help the school district to save more money. Like, want to see if there's any other projects out there that we can have this community kind of look at. Like, for example, I know installing LED lights, that's another option to be able to help district save money. I just want to see if there's any other possible projects that this committee can recommend or look at to help district, especially with how much money we're going to lose next couple of years. So we want to see how we can save the district money.
Okay, temperature check if everyone could lower their hands and then raise their hands if they'd like solar on a future meeting. Okay, I see quite a few numbers. All right, great. And then going back to you, Liz.
Sorry, sometimes you hit a button multiple times and it goes back and forth and you end up not with the option you want there.
No worries.
But, so I wanted to bring up the matter of future meetings. Since planning for a school opening is ongoing, it would seem to me to be worthwhile for this committee to have some additional meetings in the coming months, if only once a month or twice, you know, depending on the scenario, of course. But I do feel like we will need to meet more.
Well, I'm going to let you in on a secret, and I was going to add that to the agenda anyways. But nonetheless, I would love to see the committee's views on that right now. So if you could lower your hands and raise your hands on interest. Okay. All right, that's quite a number. Okay, so it looks like the next meeting is pretty planned out. You know, we have term renewal, MIP and SIP, bringing on Bringhurst, solar LED, and other projects to save the district money, future meetings, as well as the demographer, as well as any staff updates. So I think we've pretty much planned out that meeting. So it'll be a pretty full meeting, and keep in mind it will be in 2 weeks or so. May 27th, I believe. Okay. Outside of that, I see no hands, and we can now adjourn. So thank you very much, everybody, and have a great night.